This is the Brew World Order Podcast.
Welcome to the Brew World Order Podcast, the podcast where we talk to brewery owners and ask questions about owning a brewery so that future brewery owners can learn a thing or two. My name is Mike Curtin, and if you haven't subscribed yet, just move your fingers around and press some buttons on your phone. I'm sure one of them is it. This is episode 66, and in this episode, I sit down with Armando DeDona, co-owner of Long Live Beerworks in Providence, Rhode Island. Armando tells me how they dealt with the COVID shutdowns and made it work for them so that they could stay in business, how dealing with Untapped and Yelp reviews in the beginning threw him for a loop, and how on paper his business is successful and his peers look at Long Live as a success, but Armando still feels humble to the point where he always needs to keep going and reaching for the moment where he truly feels successful. I could totally relate to what Armando is saying. I'm 66 episodes in, started back in 2019, work hard at editing every episode, and continue posting on social media. And I still don't feel that successful, even though the 3 people who listen to the podcast tell me it's great. I don't know. Maybe the 4th listener will be the one that changes my mind. We'll see. I'm just kidding, people. It's what I do. I'm just a silly bastard. I appreciate every one of you that takes out the time to listen to the podcast. I wish I could buy you all a beer. I know that one day it'll come when I open my own brewery. But in the meantime, you crack open one of yours. You sit back and enjoy the podcast. Thank you. Armando DeDona was born and raised in West Haven, Connecticut. Growing up, his friends who he would attend New England Revolution soccer games with started to get into homebrewing, and it was during that time that Armando's interest in homebrewing started to grow as well. As a gift, his sister brought Armando a homebrewing kit from Marshall's. He brewed his first 2 batches and they would come out not so tasty, but after that he would up his game by moving on to 5-gallon kettles and plastic carboys. From there, his beers would get significantly better as he would continue to homebrew for the next 15 years. Armando would reach a point in his life where he was ready for a career change. He looked towards getting a job at a brewery, but there weren't many around the area he lived in Rhode Island. He finally hit a boiling point where he was over his job. His wife told him to write down 3 things he loved and see if he could start a business with it. One of those things just happened to be beer, and it was at the top of his list. He decided to attend Brew Lab in England to learn more and perfect his craft. In 2014, he would finish his schooling, and when he came back, he would go full force towards opening what is now known as Long Live Beerworks. And Armando is here with me today. Armando, how's it going?
Good. Pretty good.
During that process of opening your brewery, from the start, when you first thought of the idea, to the moment you opened your doors, what would you say was the most challenging part for you?
The most challenging part was all the paperwork I had to do. Zoning work, waiting for the zoning change and having to go to zoning hearings and meetings with the head of the zoning board. That was very time consuming. And then it was convincing city inspectors that we're not some giant bomb that can go off any second.
Right.
That was really the most challenging part of it. And waiting on construction time. Construction took way longer than it should. I think it always does for every brewery for the most part.
Yeah, right. Usually take that time and then double it up.
Yep.
And what was that aha moment for you? What was the moment that sticks out that when you were like, I'm doing this, it's happening, and you started going full force towards opening a brewery?
That moment happened about almost in the home stretch of opening, and I was still working my full-time job. And at the time, I was a union bricklayer, and I kept having this nightmare that I was going to fall off the staging and in a very specific location and fall to my death.
Whoa.
And then one day I was at work, and it felt just like that dream. So I just said, I quit. And then I went to trying to get the brewery ready full-time instead of working full-time and working on the brewery over the weekends.
Gotcha. And where did you wind up coming up with the name for your brewery, Long Live?
Originally, me and my wife were coming up with concepts of, beer is dead, long live beer.
Right.
And that's pretty much where it came from. And we really wanted to be called Long Live Beer at the time, but somebody had a website called Long Live Beer, just right over the border in Massachusetts. So we switched to Long Live Beerworks.
Very nice. And how did you go about choosing the location you first opened in? Because now you're in a different location now, which is really nice. How did you first go about finding that location?
We lived on the west side of Providence, which is it's pretty much like its own small town. used to be the affordable side of town, and then it turned into the cool side of town.
Right. Okay.
And we knew we wanted to be on the west side. So I was constantly looking at real estate ads and listings. Our space came up for rent. That whole building was just being fixed up and everything was going to be for rent. And it was right around the corner from one of our favorite bars, two of our favorite bars, which is the Avery, which is a speakeasy cocktail beer bar.
Right.
And then there's the E&O Tavern, which recently closed, which was like a great dive that we used to go to pretty much every Friday.
Very cool. And how did you go about finding the capital to fund your business?
Pretty much self-funded. We had some savings because, to be honest, we lived absolutely frugal for a very long time. At one point in my life, I was dead broke, flat broke, had zero money, and my wife was in college at the time. We weren't married yet, and she was stealing food from the cafeteria to help feed me.
Right.
I was broke and jobless. So from that point on, that was very early in our relationship. We just became money conscious.
Right.
And we saved money, didn't really spend too much money. And then we built a brewery for a song, for an absolute song. And then we also, I had a union annuity, which is like a 401k, and I was able to borrow against that for like 2%.
Right. You were open for, I'd say, about 4 years before the whole COVID shutdowns happened. How did you go about handling that, pivoting to make your business work for you?
We basically, for the first year of COVID, we were flat out making as much beer as we possibly could make, and didn't really feel too much different. And then, people were getting stimulus checks, or unemployment was very easy to get.
Right.
People were still spending money for the most part. For the second year of COVID, what we did was, because everything changed in the second year for everybody across the board. We just cut production by a quarter, just slowed down a little bit. We don't do a lot of distribution. We barely do any. And we mostly just sell retail out of the tap room. For me and my wife, Jessica, it's about having control over the sale of our products. Instead of keep production going and putting up numbers and trying to find places for it to go, we just slow down a bit.
Gotcha. Did you have to wind up laying anybody off at the time, or were you able to keep all your employees on?
At the beginning of COVID, we had to lay off the vast majority of our staff because we didn't have a tap room anymore. There really wasn't room for the majority of the front of the house. We kept 2 full-time people from the front of the house, a couple other full-time people, all were really sick at the beginning, so we just couldn't have them come in. At the beginning of COVID, nobody really knew what it was, so anybody that was sick just couldn't come in, and that included some full-time people.
Right.
And it actually took them a long time to get better, to feel better. And at that point, we didn't really have the room for them, except for back of the house. We just kept it like a skeleton crew.
Gotcha. Pandemics aside, obviously, but what's something when opening your brewery, is it something you never thought you were going to have to deal with?
When I first opened, I never thought I was going to have to deal with the amount of criticism that I got, good and bad. I was from the other end, and, when Untapped first came out, I definitely wrote a couple mess, M-E-H,
right.
on people, and I've only written one Yelp review ever, and it was about a bowling alley.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I was just really unaware of the amount of criticism that we were getting from consumers, good and bad.
Right. Yeah. It's social media, and everybody's a critic nowadays, and it's pretty wild.
It was a bit overwhelming at first.
I completely get it. And what are some qualities that you possess that make you a good business owner?
When I think of my qualities, I think of the scene from Gladiator when Joaquin Phoenix is describing his qualities.
Okay.
And one of them is ambition and relentlessness,
Yeah.
It's in my mind to always do better and make things better. We're 6 years in, and I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking how I could change a procedure, alleviate a problem. Me and my wife always had a motto: if we can't afford to change something, we could fix it with hard work and a little thought.
Right.
And that's pretty much been our motto this whole time. So hard work, grinding out hours, I have no issue doing that whatsoever. I've definitely done some 48-hour days at the brewery.
Right.
Where I just never left and just kept working. Yeah, so I think that's one of my qualities is creativity and hard work with my wife helping me. She is organization and procedural, and she's also creative. She does all of our social media. She does our labels and a lot of design, even in the brewery.
Very cool. Yeah, I hear that from pretty much everybody that, owning a brewery is not a 9-to-5 job. So if you think that's what's going to come with it, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's definitely not a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah,
I kind of miss those days.
And what do you think's the biggest lesson you've learned so far since opening?
It's a good one. To listen to your consumers. That's probably the biggest lesson.
Okay.
Listen to the consumer.
Right.
There's like the argument over who dictates the market, the creator, the manufacturer, or the consumer. It's a combination of both. You have to be innovative and you have to listen to your consumer to see if they like something or not.
Right. I know you've probably come across many people in the beer industry, even before you opened your brewery, but who do you think's inspired you the most in the beer industry?
I get inspiration from just about every brewery out there, and it's good or bad. First started dating, my wife and I, we were going to breweries in the early 2000s.
Right.
We still go to a ton of breweries. Like if we take a trip, we'll probably hit about 10 breweries in like 2 days usually. We find inspiration in everything. The key inspirations for me for opening a brewery was we had a local brewery here, and it was a group of friends. They were home brewers, and they had a 1-barrel kit. And then within like 2 years, they had a 20-barrel kit.
Wow.
And they really inspired me to open up a brewery. They did make horrible beer, though, and have since called it quits. But they did inspire me to open up a brewery, because if those guys could do it, I figured I could do it,
Right. Well, I'm sorry to hear that they made horrible beer, even though they inspired you.
That's all right. I can say that because my two of my brewers, ex-brewers used to work there, and we just would joke about it.
Right. So how do you define success? And is there a moment that sticks out for you that you kind of look back on where you're like, this is a moment that kind of you knew things were going in the right direction?
That is I know I keep saying that's a good question, but how do you define success? I really can't tell you, because even 6 years in, we don't feel successful, although we do hear it from our peers that who look up to us that we are successful. We never feel it, to be honest with you.
Right.
Every week still feels like a street fight in a way, where we're trying to learn and grow and push forward and deal with a new issue or an old issue that keeps reoccurring. So success, I really can't tell you. I know on paper we're successful. It's easy to, navel gaze or think about your problems but we do have a lot of success here. We absolutely do, but it still just does not feel like it at all.
Right.
I'm not talking about sales or anything. It's just, I still have a weird bug up my butt that I need to make a better product or something new all the time,
Right.
We been in for 6 years. I probably made about 300 or 400 different IPAs, and I still feel like I haven't nailed it yet. So as far as being successful, yeah, I guess we are, but I just don't feel like it.
Just constantly chasing perfection.
Chasing perfection. That's if you were to ask me what would be the meaning of life, I would say it would be the pursuit of satisfaction. So maybe the meaning of owning a business is the pursuit of success.
Right. And is there, as the second part of that question, is there a moment that sticks out for you where things were kind of going? I know there was a huge line out the front door on your opening day, but something similar to that kind of just stuck out to you as we're doing good here. We're moving in the right direction.
Once we started canning, we would just start selling out of beer instantly. And that was
awesome.
Just that was an aha moment for us. Meaning at that, all of a sudden we just could not make enough beer in our tiny little space that we had. And it felt good, and it was just a shock to me,
Of course. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure the first time it happens, you're like, whoa, that's surreal almost. There's about, give or take, I believe 40 breweries in Rhode Island now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. I hear a lot of, there's a lot of almost like a brotherhood, and everybody helps. Everybody wants to see everybody do good. But how do you go about staying ahead of the competition?
it's just pushing innovation and pushing your product, playing with new ingredients, new techniques. Early on, there's a few of our breweries, New England IPAs were relatively new at the time. And there was like 2 local breweries making them in Rhode Island, and it was Proclamation Ale and Tilted Barn Brewery. It felt like a good, friendly competition to see who could make a higher acclaimed, more sought after beer.
Right.
Pushing your hopping rates, using different hops. At the time, access to certain hops were unavailable to me. We just kept going and going, pushing harder. At the same time, still relatively friendly with each other.
Right.
Even to the point of where we used to, if we had a weekly canning release, we would stagger it with other breweries. We'd like a few times, like send a text to this other brewery and like, are you releasing a can on Wednesday? And if they said, yeah, I'm like, okay, well then I'll do Thursday. Because we just didn't really, well, it is a competition. We didn't want to step on each other's toes.
Right. Of course. And I know it could be very stressful owning a business. How important is a mental break for you? And what does that look like?
I don't think I really do get those breaks. I mean, like traveling is great for clearing your head and picking up inspiration. Pretty much all we do when we travel, my wife and I, is drink a ton of alcohol, and eat a lot of food, and like walk around cities.
Right.
We recently went to Charleston, North Carolina, and there's a ton of breweries in town. There's like a lot right next to each other. And so we walked to like from one to another, to another, to another, and just, have a beer in each one. I love checking out breweries, especially new breweries. I recently checked out a few breweries that opened up in the past year or so in Rhode Island this weekend, and it is really inspiring just to go to a new brewery. Every time I go to a new brewery, I always pick up something.
Right.
Something that I, can appreciate or admire. So for clearing my head, what do I do? Traveling. We do a lot of walking, my wife and I.
Right.
We, instead of driving somewhere, we usually just walk there. Nature helps out too.
For sure.
But, usually just do a lot of beer drinking. That's about it.
Yeah, I like to compare going to a bunch of breweries as almost like just seeing other people's artwork, almost like an art exhibit, because I feel like you see it's a different canvas every single time. Not every brewery looks the same. Some do, but like you get to see other people's artwork out there and like their experimentation with beers, and it's almost like a walking into a new palette every single time. It's kind of interesting.
I like that analogy, to be honest with you, because it is like making beer is very creative, and it's like a creative release for a lot of people. A lot of like brewers were artists in some way. I know that Dave, who recipes used to be the owner brewer Proclamation, was a musician, and so I know from one of his staff that he used to relate it to like songs or albums every beer,
right.
And it is really like a creative release. I need to make something. I can't have a job where I don't physically make something. It's fun to see someone's interpretation of a style. I'm not really too strict. We do make some traditional beers that are by some guidelines.
Right.
But I'm really not too strict when it comes to tradition or guidelines. And it's very interesting to taste someone else's interpretation of like a New England IPA or stout, fruited sour. We had a Russian brewer stop by, and he brought some of his fruited sours, and they tasted so bizarre to me, because even though like it's like I know the fruits that he used in it, but these are all like Russian grown fruits,
right? Like
Russian grown blackberry, and it tasted so different than ours. Way different. So yeah, I mean, I guess, and most breweries do look a little different. I guess a lot can look the same. They might have like the corrugated metal around the bar and like the simple bar stools.
Right,
That's what we used
sure.
to have. And I think we're moving in the direction where breweries are going to be looking better and better, and moving out of like, industrial parks and, metal warehouses in the middle of nowhere. Not that that's bad or anything. It's just the consumers becoming more finicky of where they want to go and spend their money.
Right. Yeah, I was actually just talking to somebody about that, about how they, like that's where you usually find them, inside industrial parks, because it is a factory. You're brewing and you need a big facilities, and that's usually where you find it. But it's nice to be able to be on like a main street somewhere, and be able to do what you do.
Yep.
Within, in like walking distance of a daily chore, like going to the bank or something, and be like, I'm going to go to the bank and then stop in for a beer. So, yeah, I mean, I hope to see that more and more. I think everybody does. But speaking of that change, what do you think's been the biggest change in the last 5 years in the industry for you?
For me personally, for our business personally, the biggest change is, I really can't say because it feels like nothing changes at all. It feels like the same day. Not that that's bad. It's just I focus so much on work that I never feel like anything ever changes.
Right.
But I think in the industry, the acceptance of new styles of beer. When we first started, there was not a ton of New England IPAs around. I mean, we're not that far from Treehouse and Trillium, and those guys,
right,
make some of the best IPAs in the world.
Yeah, definitely. Really good.
And at the time, there wasn't any New England IPAs on the shelves in liquor stores. And then a few came around, and now it's mostly New England IPAs. So the acceptance of styles too, like a highly fruited sour at the Extreme Beer Fest. Someone might have had a cucumber goza and a pastry stout and maybe a aged mixed culture beer, and this would have been at the Extreme Beer Fest. Well, everything that was extreme 5 years ago is normal, absolutely normal now.
Yeah, right.
We do a lot of high gravity stouts, stouts being one of my favorite styles to drink. And, we do have some mixed culture stuff, but I tend to buy more of that than make that, to be honest with you. And, it used to be very hard to come across certain styles. Now, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. So I think that's the biggest change that I've noticed is what used to be extreme and rare is now the absolute normal.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say was your gateway beer into the craft beer world?
My gateway beer was Newcastle Brown Ale.
Newcastle. Okay.
Yeah. When I was about 19, I was dating this 23-year-old lady, and she used to sneak me into the bar. They actually never carded me till I turned 21, but I would order a Newcastle Brown Ale because someone I knew would order one. My friend Dennis. That was my wow, beer has flavor. Beer can have flavor.
Yeah.
And then after that, we went to this bar called Rudy's in New Haven, a dive bar that's been there since the 60s. But one day they got Magic Hat number 9 on draft.
Nice.
And that blew me away.
Yeah. That was a big one. That was a big one for me as well.
And another beer I have to say that kind of made me think what is this flavor was we used to taking the train to Manhattan used to only cost $10 for a round trip ticket through Metro North.
Okay.
And we'd go to as young punks, we'd go to Thompson Square Park and buy beer from bodegas. And I bought a Ballantine's, and I was just what am I tasting in this beer, which is a pretty old school IPA,
right?
Yeah.
And
I was what is this? Because at the time we were drinking the absolute, as underage kids, we drink whatever we can pay someone to buy for us, which usually was Schaefer or Red Dog,
right,
or Milwaukee's Best,
Natty Ice and all those good ones.
Yeah, we used to. There's plenty of people homeless, not necessarily homeless, but street people that would give him money to buy beer and give him $5 and a thank you beer, and they'd get us a 30 pack of beer. Your friends would drink it in an alley or something, or someone's apartment. So it started out with Newcastle Brown, then Magic Hat number 9 and Valentine's around the same time.
Gotcha. And what would you say is next for your brewery? What does the future look like for Long Live?
That is, I wish I knew that answer, to be honest with you. I ask myself that every day. The future is we are definitely looking to expand and grow. I really don't want to give away any information, but we're definitely going to trying to expand into other states, as in maybe opening up another brewery in another state.
Very cool.
We still want to be like the small family mom and pop brewery, though. For majority of our staff, we're all really close, especially during COVID. We'd like spend holidays with each other. We closed the brewery for one of my taproom staff's wedding. We closed on a Saturday, on like the busiest Saturday too. So it's, we'll make those sacrifices for the people who work for us.
Of course.
We're going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep pushing to try to make the best IPAs and keep experimenting. We've got like a few maybe projects happening that we're working on, but I don't really want to talk about them until like everything's set in stone. Definitely would like to open up and build out another brewery. That's not necessarily in the works. I'm waiting for the perfect spot.
Right.
Perfect
when the time is
location.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
And then opening up another brewery in another state. That's what we're actually pursuing right now. We'll most likely start doing a little self-distro in Rhode Island. Up until recently, it wasn't allowed. Now we have a little bit looser laws, and self-distribution is something I'm actually looking forward to. I don't want this brewery to stay like elusive and hard to get. I definitely like to see our stuff on liquor store shelves someday.
Right. Me too.
Yeah. I mean, keep trying. So that's pretty much about it. I mean,
okay.
we keep hemming and hawing over like a restaurant concept for the brewery, like in another location.
Right.
But COVID really put a stop to a lot of our plans that we had.
Yeah. I think I did that to a lot of people, kind of put a kink in the plans when everybody was like, oh, like this is the next step and this is the next step and we're going to go here and we're going to do this, and things were going well. And then all of a sudden it was just like halt.
Yeah,
so,
definitely. I mean, for the first time in a long time, 2020, my wife and I had the opportunity to start traveling a lot. And our plan was to travel once a month. And in January, I think we went to Texas, Dallas, and Austin. February, we went to Maine. March, we went to Florida, Jacksonville, and Miami. And then COVID hit, and then that was the end of that for a very long time.
Yeah. You're making nice little rounds there, though. But it's crazy. Thank God everything's kind of going back to normal now, and hopefully that won't happen again. But if someone came to you and asked you for advice on opening their own brewery, what would you tell them?
I actually just gave advice to someone the other day. For that specific person, I was like, you should hire a social media person, because you're another old guy like me and you really have no business running your social media.
Right.
I would say make sure that you can withstand like a 2-year build out just in case, because especially with COVID right now, construction costs are all-time high, material costs are all-time high.
Yeah.
And I would say make sure you have a way to sustain living while you endure the construction build out. That, and don't open up in Rhode Island, because we're still a little backwards here. Like,
okay.
In Massachusetts, breweries have pretty much carte blanche of what they can do. They can self-distro. They can sell as much cans as they want, as much pours. But in Rhode Island, we keep pushing for changes, but we're allowed to sell 36 ounces of in-house beverage. So that's 3 12-ounce pours. And we just got it raised to 2 cases of beer to go. And we just got a little bit of self-distro. So it's a little harder to do business here. Yeah. But it's such a small state, you could just go over the border to Massachusetts and open up a brewery and do whatever you want, pretty much.
Yeah, right. Sounds a little complex.
But, I opened up in Rhode Island, but I live in Providence, 2006, and we're not going to live anywhere else.
Right. I'm sure you wouldn't want to travel, have a huge travel in the morning. God forbid anything does happen in the brewery. You probably want to be really close by, especially, when you're in the opening stages.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Living close is nice. I used to live about half a mile away from here. Now I live across town. Really no big deal.
Right.
I don't have to come in as early as I used to. I used to get to work at like 6 a.m. Now I like the term 8-ish. I'll come in around 8-ish.
Right.
That's a good time for me.
You just roll in 9 o'clock. I said 8-ish.
It varies. So I'll wake up early and I got thoughts in my head. I'll just come straight to work and I'll get here whenever I wake up. It could be 4 a.m. or whatever, and start working on projects. Or if I'm I want to chill and have coffee at home, it'll be 8 or 9 in the morning.
Gotcha. And do you happen to have a funny story for us?
I do. My wife doesn't think it's funny.
Oh.
She thinks it's
Uh-oh.
gross. Like when I brewed my first batch of beer in the original spot, I went to dry hop in the top port of the tank, and I didn't use the ladder like I should have. It was a step ladder, and instead of unfolding it, I leaned it up against the tank.
Oh, no.
And when I was pouring the hops in, the ladder slipped, and I knocked a valve off with my head on the tank.
Wow.
And beer is gushing out, and but I was able to like grab a clean valve out of a bucket and throw it on, seal up the gusher. And in our old spot, the whole front is windows, and it was tiny. So while I did all that, and I had a big wound on my head, and I'm like, I had blood pouring down my face. I look out the front door, which is about 20 feet away, and there's like a couple like staring at me, like gaped mouths open, like in shock of what I was doing, and my face. I look like Carrie.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it was that. I think that was a funny story. I don't know, maybe it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard many brewing mishaps, man. I haven't heard that one though.
Yeah, I mean,
that sucks.
I have some other stories, but I don't want to tell them on a podcast.
That's fine. Maybe if I swing by the brewery when I'm on a trip to Rhode Island this summer, you can tell me in person.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Definitely.
So I have a little segment called Quickfire 5. 5 quick questions, beer related. You ready?
Sure. Yep. I hope I'm quick. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Somebody comes into your brewery. What's one of the beers you recommend they try?
Definitely the All Seeing Eye. It's our flagship beer. It's one of the earliest beers that we canned, and it's probably our most well-known beer, and it's been our most consistent beer we've had since we've opened. And, I like it.
Awesome. If you can collaborate with any other brewery on a beer, who would it be?
It would definitely be Trillium. I've definitely asked, and I got a wait and see reply.
Right.
I think that they make some of the best beer in the world. Everything they do is great, and I look up to them. Yeah,
they're definitely one of my top favorites for sure. Favorite name you've come up with for one of your beers?
I would say it was a beer called Fruit Dudes. We called it Fruit Dudes.
Fruit Dudes.
Which was like a sour beer with raspberry, pineapple, and vanilla. My wife does our labels, so I, usually just shoot her over the information. And I had like a list of like 5 names, and that's out of the 5 names for that one beer, that's the only one she would allow me to use. Like usually kiboshes or vetoes,
right?
Certain names. I like the absurd and the silly, but the consumer's not going to understand where it comes from.
Gotcha. Barrel aged, imperial, or both?
Both, definitely. I have a ton of. That's like my thing. I have like a warehouse full of barrel aged stouts.
Awesome.
I love stouts. I love barrel aged stouts, and like I'll like go through and try to sample, leave like 2 hours later drunk from drinking like 1 ounce samples.
Yeah, for sure.
My barrel farm over there.
Right. I think that was my favorite trip out to Alesmith, because they have the Speedway stout, but they have so many different varieties of it. I didn't want to leave. And you have 1 keg of beer to hold you over for a 2-week quarantine. Which beer are you choosing?
But I definitely would pick we have a Foeder Pilsner on draft called Foeder Aged Robot House, and I definitely would drink that. It's got great toasty Foeder flavor, oak flavor, and then it has like a lot of that slight lime flavor we get from our yeast that we use for Pilsners. It's really drinkable and crushable.
Gotcha. Well, Armando, that's all I have for you, man.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast, here with Armando DeDona, owner of Long Live Beerworks in Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you, man.
Yep, thank you.
Hey, guys. Thank you so much for listening to my interview with Armando DeDona, co-owner of Long Live Beerworks in Providence, Rhode Island. Whether you're passing through, you live in the area, or just visiting a friend nearby, definitely check them out. Their outside sitting area is absolutely gorgeous on a summer day. Also, give them a follow on social media while you're at it. Because they have amazing artwork on their beer cans, and they'd love for you to see it. Every other Sunday, I'll be releasing a new episode, so subscribe and you'll never miss one. Also, check us out on social media because I'm asking you to. And I'll give you updates on the podcast. I'm Mike Hurton for the Brew World Order Podcast. You stay safe out there.